Welcome back to XPAD Over the past 4 episodes, we have systematically peeled back each layer of XPAD, from its original design philosophy to its runway-independent launch and recovery system, from autonomous combat capability to the specific missions XPAD can perform on the modern battlefield. Everything we have analyzed so far has revolved around one central question: what XPAD can do? But tonight, in episode 5, we move to a deeper level. We are no longer talking about technology. We are no longer examining individual systems. We are no longer focused on a single weapon. Instead, we address a far larger question. Why could the emergence of XPAD force many nations to rewrite their entire military doctrine over the next decade? For more than half a century, air power doctrine among major powers has been built around 3 core pillars. First, fixed runways. Second, large centralized bases. And third, human pilots sitting inside the cockpit. The entire structure of air warfare, from defense and offense to logistics and strategic deterrence, has revolved around these 3 elements. XPAD breaks all 3 at the same time. When runways are no longer required, when massive fixed bases are no longer essential, and when human lives are no longer placed in frontline cockpits, the old logic immediately becomes obsolete. What were once considered strategic advantages suddenly turn into liabilities. Gigantic air bases, extremely expensive fighter fleets, and long, complex supply chains become the most vulnerable targets in modern conflict. XPAD forces military planners to rethink air power from its foundations. What air superiority truly means, what real deterrence looks like, and what dominance means on the battlefield of the 21st century. And that is why XPAD is not merely a new weapon system. XPAD is a doctrinal shock.
When a military doctrine collapses, the most dangerous loss is not weapons, but the way of thinking itself. For decades, air power strategy was built on one assumption: if you protect the bases, protect the runways, and protect the pilots, air superiority remains intact. XPAD destroys that assumption. When aircraft can appear from virtually anywhere, without runways, without fixed bases, and without human pilots on board, traditional defense models become slow, expensive, and increasingly ineffective. Air defense systems are designed to protect fixed locations. Radar networks are built around predictable air corridors. Counterstrike doctrines focus on disabling enemy bases. XPAD offers none of those targets. There is no central base to destroy, no runway to neutralize, no pilot whose loss can be used as deterrence. Instead, adversaries face a far harder problem: how to counter a force that is mobile, unpredictable, and capable of constant redeployment. And because defensive costs almost always exceed offensive costs, XPAD creates a clear asymmetric advantage. It does not need to defeat the enemy in the air, it only needs to remove their certainty that they control their own sky. That is the moment when the old doctrine begins to collapse.
The threats facing our nation never sleep. They observe every movement, every shift, every gap in defensive systems. Iran, Russia, China, North Korea, extremist networks. At this very moment, they may be watching these images. And that alone is not the danger. The danger is standing still. XPAD was not created because war is desired. XPAD exists because war is understood. The people behind this system are not theorists. They have been to the battlefield. They have seen loss. They understand the cost of hesitation and error. Their mission was never to build weapons to be used. It was to build power that prevents their use. XPAD is the result of that mindset. A platform shaped by real combat experience, by lessons from Ukraine, by environments where GPS is denied, where human reaction alone is no longer enough. XPAD does not replace humans. XPAD protects them. It allows air power to exist without placing pilots on the front line. And that alone changes the logic of deterrence. When adversaries realize they cannot cripple air power by striking bases, cannot impose costs through human casualties, cannot predict where response will come from or at what scale, the decision to initiate conflict becomes far more dangerous. That is why XPAD does not merely force nations to acquire new weapons. It forces them to rethink how war itself is conceived. And that is the essence of doctrinal change.
But XPAD's impact does not stop at the battlefield. It reaches directly into the rooms where political decisions are made. For decades, the decision to go to war was tied to a familiar calculation. How many pilots would be lost? How many aircraft destroyed? How many bases exposed? XPAD removes that calculation entirely. When there is no pilot in the cockpit, when bases are no longer fixed targets, when forces can disperse, relocate, and redeploy continuously, war ceases to be a traditional war of attrition. And when the cost can no longer be clearly estimated, decision-makers hesitate. This is deterrence in a new form, not deterrence by numbers, not deterrence by explosive power, but deterrence by uncertainty. XPAD forces adversaries to ask questions they cannot answer. Where will the strike come from? When will it occur? How many platforms are involved? And can it even be stopped? Throughout military history, major wars have begun when one side believed it fully understood the other. XPAD destroys that assumption. That is why XPAD forces nations to reassess their doctrines entirely. Air defense doctrine, preemptive strike doctrine, base protection doctrine, expeditionary force doctrine. Frameworks built over decades suddenly lose their certainty. And when doctrine shifts, national strategy must follow. That is why XPAD is not merely a military story, it is a political story, a strategic deterrence story, and a story about the future security order of the next decade.
Ladies and gentlemen, episode 5 of X-BATLive comes to a close here. Across these 5 episodes, we have not merely examined a new aircraft. We are witnessing the emergence of a new way of war. XPAD does not seek victory through numbers. It does not seek dominance through spectacle. It wins by ensuring that adversaries hesitate before a conflict even begins. That is the deepest essence of deterrence in the 21st century. But when a technology is powerful enough to reshape military doctrine, it inevitably triggers global reactions. And that is where we are headed in episode 6. In the next episode, we will look beyond the United States. How will other military powers respond to XPAD? Who will be forced to adapt first? Who will attempt to replicate it? And who will be left behind in the global redefinition of air power? I'm Hai. Thank you sincerely for staying with us through episode 5. If you found this analysis valuable, please like, subscribe, and enable notifications to continue this journey with XPADLive. I look forward to seeing you in episode 6. Thank you and goodbye.